Hello. Hello again, I think. If this is the first time we've met, hi, my name's Sean Whitaker. If this is not the first module you've been run, then you know who I am. I'm Sean. I just realised I didn't really introduce myself on the other modules too much as well. Oh, well, let's move on. This module is me I'm going to give you a very high-level introduction to the world of Agile, so you know what it is and perhaps what it isn't. So that's my goal. Now, Agile can be it could be as simple as it's just a mindset or an approach. It can also be very detailed about specific tools and techniques and methods. We're not going to go there. I'm just going to give you a high-level introduction to where Agile came from. I'm going to give you an introduction to Disciplined Agile. It's a particular Agile approach that I like because it combines a lot of the other Agile methods into it. So instead of just learning about Scrum or Kanban, once you learn Disciplined Agile, you sort of know certainly the basics of all of those anyway. So that's what my goal is. At the end of this, you'll know where it came from and some of the basic concepts of Agile, particularly Disciplined Agile. But we need to start somewhere first. We need to start with that word Agile. When somebody says they're Agile or they're doing Agile or they're becoming Agile, the first thing you need to ask is, what exactly do you mean when you use that word? Only because I've seen online, particularly LinkedIn, many times where people aren't using it the same way and they get into horrible arguments. So I wrote a blog a few years ago. You can find it. It'll be on this website somewhere. And I said, well, actually, I've noticed online that there are actually 4 different ways that people use the word Agile. And if they're not using it in the same way, they end up in arguments. So let's just quickly get rid of the way that we'll just run through all 4 of them. The first one is Agile software development. And Agile software development, well, if we just go back a slide, one of the things, we're not going to cover Agile workspaces and Agile working, okay? These 2 here. You see organizations have Agile workspaces, hot desking and no assigned desk and lockers, and you could choose, and then Agile working. We see a lot of this with hybrid and remote and virtual ways of working as well. But when companies say they're going Agile, some of them mean this is what we're doing. Hot desking and remote and hybrid ways of working. But we're going to focus on these first 2, Agile software development and Agile project management, just to be clear. But again, the first question you need to ask people is, what do they mean when they say the word Agile? So Agile software development, that's what we're going to focus on. That's what I'm going to introduce you to. So the background to Agile software development is that for most of human history, the things that we built were hard, tangible things. And before the rise of the computer age in, say, the 70s, 80s, and definitely the 90s with the introduction of the internet, we built tangible things from wood and steel and stone. And when you build those things, we call that a predictive environment. We generally know that what you do is you design something, then you go ahead and build what you've designed. And what you end up building is pretty close to what you designed because you've done it before. You've built one house, you've built 100 houses, you've built a temple, you've built an arena, you built a factory, you built a machine. Projects were really around building something tangible. And we had this approach called the predictive approach, which just meant we kind of know at the end what it's going to look like. We've just got to plan that and then build it, predictive. It sometimes gets called the waterfall approach because of a particular concept out of the United States Department of Defense, but that implies that there's sort of sequential stages without iterations, which is not what it is. Predictive just means we kind of generally know what we're building and we can plan it and build it as planned. Okay. And then the rise of computers and with it software, the need to develop software from the second half of the 20th century arose. And there were attempts to develop software along those lines of, well, let's just design all the software we want, then code the software and surely it will work. And a growing number of software engineers actually realized that that wasn't working as well as it could be, and that this assumption that you just planned what you wanted and coded it and it would work wasn't working in actual reality. So they were actually advocating for a new range of lightweight methodologies. In fact, I believe that the first proposed name for what we now called Agile was light, or light methodologies. And then at a particular conference, the vote was taken and the decision was made to call it Agile. So we nearly came close to being called light development or light methodologies. So in the 90s, the mid-90s up until the early 2000s, this developed and finally got codified and documented in the early 2000s, I think 2001, 2002, with the Agile Manifesto. And you can go to the Agile Manifesto page and it looks like two badly coded HTML websites, or 2 pages of badly coded HTML that have never been updated because, well, it is frankly 2 pages of badly coded HTML that have never been updated. But it's so important because there are 2 pages. One states the 4 elements or foundations, the other one states the 12 principles of Agile. And that's what Agile should be based on, is those principles. And then the same people who put the Agile Manifesto out put out a much better looking website called agilealliance.org, where you can learn all things Agile at it. All the different Agile things are there. There's lots of free resources and lots of paid resources. So these are the 2 sites that I recommend you go to. Go to Agile Manifesto. That's 5 minutes of your life well spent. You've been there. You can even sign it still. I think you can still sign it, put your name on the list. Once you've been there and you understand the background, you can then move on to agilealliance.org. The problem with Agile is human beings don't like leaving things as free and open source. And I'm being a bit cynical, of course. So we've seen the rise in commercial hybrid or commercial Agile methodologies such as Scrum, Kanban, extreme programming, DevOps, things like that. FDD, feature-driven delivery, because you can certify people and make money out of it and that. But that's never what an Agile is supposed to be. But they're all good methodologies regardless. So as I said, I'm going to introduce you to Disciplined Agile, which is owned by the Project Management Institute. I'm a certified Disciplined Agile Scrum Master, being through their particular commercialized training. But I do like referring back to the Agile Manifesto. So that's what we're going to focus on, is Agile software development. Okay. Now, Agile project management is interesting because a lot of people say they do Agile project management. I don't think that's possible, to be honest, because Agile is about software delivery. So it's really a product delivery approach. And that's what it is. Agile is product delivery. Particularly for software. But when we refer to Agile project management, what it's basically doing is taking key concepts from Agile software development, such as the high-performing autonomous team, and applies them to a broader range of projects, not just software development. And it also focuses on delivering requirements incrementally rather than iteratively. And it takes the things of continuous improvements, retrospectives, things like that, into all sorts of projects. And Agile project management uses many of the same Agile software development methodologies as well. Now, it's not just IT projects that benefit from Agile. Construction industries can as well. So here in New Zealand, we have a large government department focused on building houses. And for many years, it uses what you call a predictable, traditional or waterfall approach to building houses. A few years ago, it experimented with both Agile and Lean. And it took a few years to get it embedded and change people's approaches, but they are now using that for a significant portion of the delivery of houses. So that's what Agile project management is. Do remember, though, that project management is everything from initiation right through to closure. That's what project management is. And that's one of the distinctions with Agile software development. It's only focused on the product delivery, not project initiation nor project closure. So anything with the phrase project management in it, in my mind, has to do the whole project lifecycle from initiation through to closure and even benefits realization. But you can bring in distinct ways of doing projects with those Agile concepts. So now that we've taken a look at Agile software development and Agile project management. Let's go back and take a look now at the Agile Manifesto. As I said, I encourage you to go spend 5 minutes. It doesn't take longer than that to go through these 2 pages there at agilemanifesto.org. This is what it says on page 1. This is all it says. We are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. So software, right there. Through this work, we have come to value. Now, just to be clear, there is value on items on the right here, but they value the items on the left more. That is, while there is value in the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. So they value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. That doesn't mean they don't have processes and tools. I'll often have somebody say, oh, we don't do cost estimating because we're doing Agile. No, not an excuse. They just value high-performing teams working together to deliver value continuously over excessive processes and tools. Okay. They value working software over comprehensive documentation. So yes, there should be documentation, there should be contracts signed, there should be scope definition, there's certainly user stories, product backlogs, things like that. But the main measure of success is working software, not the amount of documentation that you produce. So no process for the sake of process, no unnecessary bureaucracies, things like that. They value customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So yes, there should be a contract, but it shouldn't be the thing that drives the organization. The customer should be part of the team, should be regularly kept informed about what's going on, being involved in the design and the testing. So it's collaborating with the customer over setting the relationship in stone with the contract that you have with them. And then finally, responding to change over following a plan. So they do value following a plan. You should have some sort of plan, but they know that change happens every day in an agile or adaptive or iterative. You'll hear me use the terms agile, adaptive, or iterative. They're nearly interchangeable. There are subtle differences between them, but I'll use them nearly interchangeably. So they know that if an adaptive or iterative or agile project, change happens. Be prepared for it, welcome it, accept it, expect it. Have a plan, but just know that it's going to change. So don't spend too much time on a really detailed plan that you have to spend 2 days updating every day. So responding to change. So that's the 4, I guess what I call the foundational elements of Agile. I think that website was done in 2001 or 2002, and it really hasn't been updated since then. I'm not sure if you can still sign the manifesto. You used to be able to. I know I signed it many years ago. I'm not sure whether that facility is still there. You can just write your name in a box and you became a signatory to the Agile Manifesto as well. The second page of this website contains the 12 principles of Agile. You'll notice that none of those 4 foundational elements or these principles say Scrum or Lean or Kanban or anything like that, because they're not about defining a particular method. They're setting these principles. So here we go. The first one is, our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of, valuable software. So it's not just working for months, then delivering the product. It's breaking it down into iterations and increments and delivering them to the customer all the time. So is this what you wanted? Is this the value you wanted? These requirements, they're being met. So it's breaking it down rather than work, deliver something big at the end. Like say you would a house. You don't deliver the house room by room by room. You build the whole house and deliver the whole house. We welcome changing requirements, even late in development. Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. Change is expected and accepted. It's necessary and part of an iterative project. We deliver working software frequently, from a couple of weeks to a couple of months, with a preference to the shorter timescale. That's that concept of time boxing of work with iterations or sprints. That's what it's become known as, iterations and sprints. 2, 3, 4 week time boxing of work. Business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. So the team is everybody who needs to be involved. It's not developers providing the business people or the product owner with what they want. The product owner is part of the team. So it's that self-empowered team. And I often say the heart of Agile is an empowered, self-organizing, high-performing team of people, which includes the product owner. Build projects around motivated individuals. Give them the environment support they need and trust them to get the job done. There it is again, a high-performing, empowered, autonomous team. The most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face. You saw this with the module on high-performing teams. Face-to-face for people just works best. And I know there's remote and virtual ways of working, but they're second best. So you'll often find an agile team is in the same room. They have their own room. That's where they work. Working software is a primary measure of progress. That's it. How often do we hand over working software? That's our progress measurement. Agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. So there's no surge of effort, then a rest because you're exhausted. It's constant pace. So all of your time estimating is based on the velocity at which you can achieve per iteration. And that's based on not working till you die, but just working at a constant pace, the pace that you can keep going at indefinitely. That's your optimal velocity. Continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility, and that refers back to another module on quality management. Build the quality in so you're not making the mistakes. Get the technical excellence there so you're not having to come back and fix bugs afterwards. Simplicity. The art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. So don't do what you don't need to do. Just do what you have to do to get the product launched, but at a good quality. The best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from, and there it is, self-organizing team. And that's where you'll see the role of the Scrum coach or the Scrum Master, or the Agile coach. They're not taking that directive authoritarian approach. They are part of the team. They are facilitator. They are conductor, if you will. But the team organizes itself. And you've got these empowered people who are bright and intelligent working in the way that they want to. And at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. And these are these like retrospectives, where you look back and think, what could have been done better? You can always get better. And it's a team that does it, not a project manager saying you need to do it faster than that. So there we are. So nice and simple. But that's where Agile started. Nowhere, as I said, is Scrum, Lean, Kanban, DevOps, FDD mentioned in all of this, is there? It's not. Agile did not start as a methodology. It started as principles in response to predictive or waterfall approaches to project management. Out of that, we did get commercialization, different people, different organizations. So some of these are from people, some of them are from organizations. These are some of the more common types or methods or approaches of Agile. Kanban is just a particular approach. It's managed, projects are managed through the Kanban board. And the whole point of a Kanban board, and it bothers me when I see them on computer screens, the whole point of the Kanban board is it's supposed to be a massive, big, easy to see visual representation that anybody could walk past it, and on the time they walk past it, they got all the information about what the team was doing and where particular activities or user stories are at. Putting it onto a computer screen takes that away because one of the functions is supposed to be on a big wall somewhere. Best one I've ever seen was actually at the headquarters of the Project Management Institute back in 2020. You walked into the reception there at their old headquarters in Newtown Square. I think they've just moved to a different building there now. But behind reception was basically a very complex Kanban board of every IT project they had going on. And you could see at a glance what projects were on and the stages for each of them. So Kanban, that's what Kanban is. It's a simple visual means of managing projects that enable teams to see the progress so far and what's coming up next. So the default of those columns, to do, doing, done. Other columns you can add in is like stuck or I often put the backlog there too. So an item or user story moves from the backlog in the to-do column and the team pulls that through. Scrum is probably one of the most well-known Agile approaches. You can get certified in it. You can become a Scrum Master in it. There are consultants who will teach you how to Scrum. It's a very popular Agile methodology. It uses a Scrum board. That's just a Kanban board. They call it a Scrum board. Does the same thing. It has sprints. It has a Scrum Master, not a project manager. It breaks work down into one sprint at a time. It defines the role of the Scrum Master and the product owner, and it actually gets its name from the game of rugby. The story I've heard, I probably need to verify it, but the story I've heard, please verify this for me, and if I'm wrong, email me, and I'll try and get in here and re-record this bit. That the developer of Scrum was a big fan of the game of rugby, and if you know the game of rugby, it's separated into, there's 15 players per team. 8 of the players are called the forwards, and 7 of the players are called the backs. No, the running ones, and the forwards are in the scrimmage and the scrums. So that's a group of 8. 8 or less, and that is the ideal number for a Scrum team, by the way, 8 or less. Anything more than that, once a team gets bigger than 8, 9, 10, you've got a greater chance of sub-teams coming out. But there is a particular methodology called Crystal. There's Crystal, and it is agile for larger size teams, like 50 to 100. So there are agile approaches which you can use for larger teams, but for Scrum, the ideal team is less than 8, a small high-performing team. So Kanban and Scrum, and we are going to cover Crystal coming up very shortly on the next slide, just very briefly too. Extreme programming, XP, it focuses on continuous development and customer delivery, like they all do, use intervals or sprints similar to the Scrum methodology, but it also has an additional 12 supporting processes specific to the world of software development. So extreme programming is literally about coding and the best ways to do coding. Feature-driven, what's wrong with my tongue today? Feature-driven development, or FDD, is another software-specific agile framework. It's again focused, it's got time boxing of every 2 weeks, and you churn out the software within that time. It's known to be a bit more rigorous around the documentation requirements in XP, so it's better for teams that appreciate that extra level of detail with design and planning as well. So even now, you can see different agile approaches take those principles and those foundation elements slightly differently. So FDD does value more process and documentation than, say, extreme programming as well. Some other agile approaches, and by the way, you can find out much more about all of these on sites like YouTube or the specific commercial page for each of these. We've got a few more here. I think we've got another 5 to go through. So DSDM, it's again rapid software development. So that's what they've all got in common: software development. It expects rework, and it expects that you can back things up and retry them and test them and figure bugs out. It uses time boxing like sprints as well, same as that. So there's a lot of similarity between Scrum, XP, FDD, DSDM. They all use sprints. They're all focused on software. It's the level of documentation, the level of testing, where they use pair programming and things like this. As I mentioned before, Crystal is a particular approach to Agile, which is scalable. So you have Crystal Clear, which is up to 8 people in a team, the Scrum team. Crystal Yellow, which is an Agile methodology for a 10 to 20 person team. Crystal Orange, specific Agile approach for a larger team, 20 to 50 person team. And Crystal Red for big teams of 50 to 100,000 people. Now, you remember one of those Agile principles was face-to-face communication is best. You've got a team of 100. They all have to be sitting in the same space too. So you'll choose which particular one suits you. So if you are dealing with large agile teams, I do recommend Crystal very highly. Lean development, it's interesting. It's often grouped as an agile methodology, but lean is more of a manufacturing one, or inventory control system. But if you are going to undertake lean development, doing agile fits in perfectly, because it's just the way that they work together. It's just it is slightly different methodology to inventory control or manufacturing that uses a lot of the same principles: that continuous improvement, continuous learning, empowered teams, those sorts of things. So it's often mentioned in the same breath, but it is slightly different. And the last ones I'll just take you through. The last two are Scaled Agile and Disciplined Agile. As I said at the beginning, I'm certified in Disciplined Agile. And I'll start with that one. It is a hybrid because it does combine elements of XP, Scrum, Kanban, and basically all the other methodologies, including SAFe. And basically what it emphasizes is in that high-performing team, they're the ones that are smart enough to determine their particular way of working. They get to choose whether they want to use a little bit of Scrum, a little bit of FDD, a little bit of SAFe, and they choose the best way of working. That's what I like about Disciplined Agile. It really puts the team at the center, lets them choose the best ways of working. Quite often with some of the other ones like Scrum or Lean or Kanban, it's imposed on teams like we're going Scrum. And certainly the Scrum manual is absolutely brilliant, and you can download it for free, by the way. But there is a paragraph towards the end of the Scrum manual which I'm paraphrasing it, but it says something along the lines of, this is how you do Scrum. If you don't do everything in this manual, do not call it Scrum. Now, some people say that that makes Scrum prescriptive, but it's not. It's literally like saying, if you're going to bake a banana cake and you're not going to put bananas in it, don't call it banana cake. That's all it's saying. It's not being prescriptive. It just say, this is what Scrum is, and if you're not going to do this, please don't call it Scrum. But I certainly see people on LinkedIn arguing the fact, well, Scrum is so prescriptive. No, it's not. It's just a really good methodology, and all they ask is, if you're not going to do it in its entirety, please don't call it Scrum. And if you're going to bake a banana cake, put bananas in it. And Scaled Agile combines Lean and Agile approach. It's another hybrid approach. These are my two favorites, to be honest, because they combine the best of other worlds, and I'm a big fan of that. I'm a big fan of methodologies that allow you to pick and choose the best to suit your team, your competency levels, your maturity levels, your complexity, and things like that. So Scaled Agile Framework and Disciplined Agile are my personal favorites because of that. You'll have your particular favorites depending on what you've been introduced to and certified in. So look, let me give you just a very quick introduction to Disciplined Agile. Again, it's a product owned by the Project Management Institute, and you can go get certified. At the time of writing, certification, I think it was about $400 or $500 US, and it's an online course you've got to do. It takes a wee while, and there's a big test to do at the end of it as well. So let's take a quick look at Disciplined Agile. And looking at Disciplined Agile will actually introduce you to a lot of the terminology concepts that you're going to come across in any Agile anyway. So at the end of this, you'll know the language and the terms and things like that that features in any Agile approach. There is a free 45-minute training video from PMI that you can watch. There's the link there. I don't believe you can click it, but if you look up, go to the PMI website, pmi.org, it actually shows as free Scrum training video, but it is actually a Disciplined Agile video. So go have a look at that. So Disciplined Agile, as I said, it takes into account your project specifics, your team, how competent they are, how experienced they are, how complex the particular project you're working on is. It is agnostic into which Agile method, and lets you choose between all of these tools and techniques to develop what they call your WOW, your way of working. And your team should do that too, by the way. This is not a role for the Scrum Master to impose. This is what the team goes, right, this is what's going to work for us in these instances. So let me introduce you to some more of it. First up, we need to introduce some of the terms that I'm going to be using. These are standard Agile terms. I'll run you through them. We've got three here: epic, feature, and user story. They are all different ways of describing the work to be done as part of the initiative that you're undertaking. Starting at the highest level, the epic. It is the large description of the high-level body of work that your initiative, I'm not going to say project, but let's say project, easiest to understand. It's the biggest description of what your project's going to be delivering. That breaks down into different features, and those features are broken down into different user stories. And we have a better description, a more detailed description of user stories coming up. So user stories are the heart of several Agile approaches, whether it's Kanban, Scrum, Disciplined Agile, SAFe. And we'll talk about what the user story is. But if you remember, the user stories aggregate up to a feature, all the features aggregate up to an epic. An iteration or sprint is what we call the time boxing. I hate that term, but the time boxing of the work to be done. And we basically say we're going to work on this particular user story or user stories plural over the next 2, 3, or 4 weeks. So generally it's either 2, 3, or 4 weeks is what we break it down to for iteration or sprint length as well. Velocity, that's just how fast, how much work a team can get done in a particular iteration. How many story points, it's usually measured in story points, and this relates back to user stories. Each user story you will give a assessment of effort using story pointing, we'll see soon planning poker or Fibonacci sequence, and you'll figure out the maximum number of user stories or story points you can do per iteration, and that will become your velocity. Value is what you deliver. That's what Agile is all about. The benefit or importance of a feature, story, or task as perceived by the stakeholders or end users, and it is the guiding decision-making priority in Agile projects. How do we deliver the most value soonest? So you need to talk with the stakeholders or end users or understand their needs. We need to deliver this value first, then that. So you're always delivering value. Next page, there's 2 pages here. Retrospective. Retrospectives generally held at the end of an iteration or sprint, where the team sets aside a specific time to look back and looks at that past iteration or sprint and identifies improvements for future iterations or sprints. So if you hear the word sprint, you know it's Scrum. If you hear the word iteration, you know it's Disciplined Agile, but they mean the same thing, time boxing of the work to be done. A burn down chart is just a way, it's a visual tool. Most Agile tools are very visual, by the way, so you can see them quickly. That shows the amount of work remaining in a sprint. So you would have tracked how much work you think you're going to do, and then you'll be tracking what you're actually doing, and you want to keep the actual below the forecast, or certainly towards the end, to make sure you've done all the work and you're getting all the work done. A sprint review, kind of like a retrospective, but it's a session at the end of a sprint where the team presents the work completed to the client or the user. They gather the feedback and discuss any adjustments that need to be made then and there, or anything that needs to be included in the next iteration or sprint. An increment is the sum of all the product backlog items completed during a sprint. So that's everything you do in a sprint, and that adds up to the usable and potentially releasable product enhancement or additions to the product. The backlog is what the product owner puts together of all of the tasks and features that they require on this particular project. They will prioritize the work in the product backlog, and it belongs to the product owner. When the team is ready to pull work through to a sprint, they will go to the product backlog and take the top items or the prioritized items and pull them through into their sprint planning session, or maybe onto their sprint backlog. So you've got the product backlog and the sprint backlog there too. And then a story point. This relates to user stories, and it's the amount. It's a unit of measure to estimate the effort or time required to complete a particular user story. And we've got some techniques coming up, planning poker and t-shirt sizing and Fibonacci sequence, that you can use to estimate the relative amount of effort to do a particular user story. And then from that, you can get the number of total story points you can complete each iteration, and that becomes your velocity. Okay, so a lot of things there, eh? It's like speaking a different language in a lot of ways. For me, Agile was always a challenge because I started my career in residential construction, building houses and townhouses, and then I moved into building cell phone base stations, did that for a while, and then I moved into software. So I actually transitioned from construction into software. But even when I did software development back in 2000, first time I did software development was 2005 to 2007. That was some really cutting edge, world-leading software development we did. But I was working with a bunch of engineers, and we still used a relatively predictive approach. Figure out the algorithms, you want to design the code for the algorithms, and then hopefully it worked. And it wasn't until I started working again on IT projects a few years later that I started to bring in Agile, and it worked a lot better for the right teams. Just keep in mind, Agile doesn't work for everybody. It really doesn't. Don't let anybody ever tell you that it does. There are some teams, even of software people, where you just go, look, we're going back mainly predictive. It just works better. So it's not the be all and end all. It's not the cure for everything. But it is very good. Very, very good. It's one of my favorite approaches. I now try and bring Agile into any project I do. So here's just a comparison between Disciplined Agile and Scrum, by the way. So over here, you've got your Scrum, and over here, you've got your Disciplined Agile. You see the diagrams the same, because it's the same. We're just looking at different terminology here. So the daily Scrum, or they'll have their iteration or sprint. So they've got their product backlog. DA's got a product backlog. Scrum has sprint planning. DA has iteration planning. You've got a sprint backlog here, which is all the work that's going to be done or can be pulled through by the team into the next sprint. There it is there. So sprint review, iteration review, same feedback loops. You deliver an increment at the end of a sprint. You do a retrospective or iteration retrospective. Scrum, you have a daily Scrum. Just call it what you want, stand-up, daily coordination meeting, things like that. So the terminology is very, very similar. The difference here is this is from a licensed product, the Scrum method. And if you're going to do Scrum, as I said before, do it according to the manual. It is a very good methodology. So there's not many different terms. They are largely the same, Scrum and Disciplined Agile. The team, the Disciplined Agile team, these are the members of the team. And remember, there's no hierarchy here. Everybody is seen as equal in the team. You'll have the product owner, whose responsibility to deal with the customer or the user. They own the actual software. They're the person responsible within the organization for the software. They're the product owner. They own it. But they should be working with the team. Absolutely should be working with the team on a daily basis. They're not the client. They are part of the team, but they own the software within the organization. It's their responsibility. They're the person who's asking for the particular features or things to be added to it, and they'll be the ones who prioritize that product backlog as well. The Scrum Master is not a project manager, absolutely not a project manager. And a lot of Scrum Masters or even Agile coaches, they're not that project manager who's directive and controlling and telling the team what to do. They are there to be facilitator, host, leader. They are there to create and maintain a successful Agile team. They are there to get rid of roadblocks and distractions, remove barriers to success. Anybody on the team can be the Scrum Master, but you see, or except the product owner, you'll see a lot of people go get training to be a Scrum Master as well, and they'll learn about coaching techniques and facilitation techniques. They'll learn about servant leadership as well. But also, don't let anybody tell you that the difference between predictive projects is they have project managers who are controlling and directive, and Agile has Scrum Masters or servant leadership and facilitative. That's simply not true. There are plenty of predictive projects that have servant leaders who use facilitative and consensus building types of leadership. So it's not a simple binary black and white on that one. You've got the team members. These are the subject matter experts and the people actually doing the work, and the architecture owner, who isn't part of the team, but they're within the performing organization, because they're making sure that all the extra features you're building, however it changes the product, still aligns with the other requirements that the business has in terms of its IT architecture. You might find somebody who's ITIL certified here. So that's the architecture owner. So the ones doing the work, this is the team, and they are a self-empowered, high-performing team. There we are. Okay, I've used some other terminology too. The product backlog is the list of user stories that the product owner has, and the product owner prioritizes them. When I do a backlog, I use what I call a floating system. So the most important user stories that I want done next, according to the value I want created, go to the top of the list, like physically to the top. And I'm old school. I do like good old post-it notes, but there's plenty of electronic tools out there now that do all of this too, and they allow you to move things around to prioritize it. Because then at that point, the team will come along and pull through items from the product backlog onto the sprint backlog. And then they'll decide, once it hits the sprint backlog, the order in which it's going to be done according to velocity and user stories. So that's what the product backlog is. It's owned by the product owner, and they can swap things around to suit their perception of what the customer's value needs are. It contains the user story, which is a very simple statement, and it just says, as a type of user. I want something so that I can do something. So the example there is, as an employee now working from home during COVID, I want to have Microsoft Office pre-installed on my home laptop so that I can carry on with my work from home. Okay. So there we are, that's the product backlog. And as I said, the product owner owns that. But once it makes it into the sprint backlog, that's the team that pulls that across. And then they organize the sprint backlog. And that is all done as part of sprint or iteration planning, where you take the items from the top, or the highest priority ones from the product backlog, you bring them through into the sprint backlog. A sprint can last anywhere between 1 and 4 weeks, depending on the speed at which you're working, the size of the team, the experience of the team, the complexity of the work. So you'll set your time boxing or your sprint and iteration length. I think you'll find 2 as the default. 2-week sprints are default, but there's no law that says that. Your sprints or iterations can be anywhere between 1 and 4 weeks. Also, when you plan the amount of work that you can do per sprint, that's where being able to estimate the amount of effort required for every user story is really important. So then you can figure out, well, we know that we can do 40 story points per sprint. That's our max. And if you can then allocate different story points to all your user stories, you obviously, when you add them up, you wouldn't have over 40 points for that particular iterational sprint if 40 was your maximum. So don't choose any more work from the backlog that you can do in a sprint iteration, because that's just inefficient, because then you have to move it backwards and forwards. So how exactly do you figure out or estimate the amount of work or effort required for a particular user story? Basically, what you're trying to do here is assign to a particular user. Everybody reads the user story, and there's lots of different ways, and teams have slightly different methods. There's planning poker, which everybody actually gets poker cards, and you can actually buy them online. And they might use the Fibonacci sequence. I've seen one though, that used the actual playing cards of Ace, King, Queen, Jack, 10, and each one was assigned a number. And when you held up the user story that everybody read, they all held up their playing card, and that was translated to a number, and then consensus was arrived at. But a simple way to do it is using the Fibonacci sequence on your planning poker cards. And the Fibonacci sequence here, if you don't know it, takes one number, takes the next number in line, adds those two together to get the next number. So 2 plus 1 equals 3, 3 plus 2 equals 5, 5 plus 3 equals 8, 8 plus 5 equals 13. And that's about as far as you go. And what you can do now is use relative weighting. So you might have some user stories which everybody goes to 3, some are a 5, and there's one 13 in there. And you'll say we can do 40 story points per sprint. So you might have a 13 and a 2 8s, so that's 16, and 13, that's 29, and 2 5s. There's 39 points. So 1 13, 2 8s, and 2 5s. So you're going to do 5 user stories this particular iteration, because you can do 40 per sprint. There we are. So that's the team members. It's like Delphi technique. Everybody gets to vote on what they think it is, and you determine the velocity as well. And the more you do it, the better you get at estimating it, because you can overestimate effort, but the more you do it. And the other ways of doing this, like t-shirt sizing, small, medium, large, extra large, is absolutely a fine way to do it as well. I've seen people use t-shirt sizing. What you're just trying to get is your estimate for effort for every user story. You know how much the total effort you can do per iteration, so you shouldn't do more than that. So that's how they do estimating in Agile. Now, there is some great science, literally science being done at the moment about cost and time estimating in Agile. So please, it is possible. If somebody asks you how much will this cost, you can use similar techniques to go, well, we can give you, obviously your cost estimates in Agile have a greater range of uncertainty in them because change happens all the time. But you can use techniques like this and then communications of uncertainty for both cost and time. Certainly, I don't take it as valid if an Agile team says, we don't know how much is it going to cost or how long it's going to take. That's simply not true. You can give answers with ranges of certainty for Agile projects, particularly if you've got people who've done these sorts of things before. Okay, so you can use different techniques there. Once you've done all the planning, the work starts of the iteration. and a key feature of any agile approach is these daily stand-up or daily scrum or daily coordination meetings. Very short meetings, 15 minutes at most generally, called stand-ups because in Scrum, no chairs are supposed to be in the room and you're supposed to stand up to encourage people to have a fast meeting. And you might find it's quite common for something like the Scrum coach or Scrum Master or Agile coach to just ask everybody 3 questions. You may have heard of these questions, something like, what did you achieve yesterday? What are you planning on achieving today? And what's stopping you? And their job is to resolve that last question there. But it's not about, you've got the Kanban board for visual updates. It's not about that. It's about talking about the things that you need resolved and how progress is going. Very short meetings. I like bringing this concept to any project or any meeting, to be honest. So that's the work. It's underway. Basic Scrum, Kanban, or task board. So over here, I would call this your backlog, sprint backlog, iteration backlog, and then they come from here into the to-do when they're ready. So you might choose 3 of these items. They come across for this. Well, actually, they should all come across. You shouldn't leave things in the sprint backlog. So they'd all come across. We're all ready to start. So they come across in to-do, and then a team member can come across and go, I've got this one. I'm moving it to it's underway or in progress or doing. And then when it's done, I'll put it here. And as I said, there's another column you can add in there called stuck or something like that. So that's the Kanban board as well. Okay, and again, it's supposed to be visual that people can see easily. The stand-up, we've talked about this already, talked about it before, the daily stand-up, the daily coordination, the daily scrum. No surprises, gets rid of blockages and issues. The Scrum Master or Agile coach, depending on what approach you're taking. And if you are a Scrum Master or Agile coach watching this, I am going to say something which annoys you. There is no difference between a Scrum Master and an Agile coach. And I know on LinkedIn, if you say that, you get all sorts of people going, well, there is, but there's not really. Servant leadership, facilitating a high-performing team. Scrum Master, Agile coach, in my definition, the Venn diagrams are pretty much completely overlapped. So that's it. And again, face-to-face, you shouldn't be having virtual stand-ups in a true high-performing Agile world. And then just some of the specific tools that you'll use. The burn down chart. In this instance, we've said that we can do 40 story points per sprint, and we've mapped that. In this case, it shows a linear decrease over the days in the iteration. So 2 weeks, so that's 10 working days. And we've assumed that it's going to be a linear decrease in story points. These are all the story points that we've done every day or remaining. So after day 1, there's still 40 story points left to deliver. After day 2, there's now 40 story points. All of a sudden, after day 3, you've delivered 15 of them. 15 story points are complete. And then you've delivered another 10 here. So you're trying to stay below that line. It's your burn down chart. And obviously you want it to be 0 at the end. If it's above 0, that just means you didn't get all the work done. If it's, you might get it done early too, by the way, finish the sprint early. So just keep that in mind. Just because your sprint is 2 weeks doesn't mean you need to take 2 weeks. If you finish early, start a new one. So don't feel obliged to do it. So that's a burn down chart. There's also variations on this. There's the burn up chart. There's velocity charts, which just shows you getting better with every sprint. This is a sprint-based chart, but there are other charts which show you how much work you do every sprint, because the assumption is when teams come together for the first time, they're not as good as working together nor doing the work as they are, say, after 4, 5, or 6 sprints, and you'll actually get a higher velocity, and there'll be an optimum level that you will achieve with a high-performing team. As you're doing the Agile work, you will do sprint or iteration reviews, which is on the last day of the iteration. And they show the key stakeholders, the product owner or the user, what they've done, and they get feedback. Is this what you want? Is this the way you want it to look? Is this the functions you wanted it to do? And that becomes part of the increment, and that obviously all adds up to the overall final product. Any feedback that's collected that requires major work that can't be fixed on the spot goes back into the product backlog, and the product owner may immediately put that back up to the top to come through in the next iteration if it's significant feedback. But certainly I know teams that for small changes will just do it right there on the spot during these iteration reviews. If it can be done quickly, there's no point putting it back into the product backlog. And then you'll make time at the end of every sprint or iteration for a retrospective, which comes immediately after the review. Immediately after the review, everyone in the team participates. The product owner, as customer representative, Scrum Master facilitates it. Stakeholder and managers are not invited though, because you want people to speak freely. If you've got the team members here, what went well, what didn't go so well, what can we improve, what still puzzles us about the way we work together. So high-performing agile teams are truly a sight to behold. They know their stuff, they work incredibly well together. And you're supposed to take the learnings into your next sprint, so every sprint gets better. It must be a psychologically safe environment. To answer these sorts of questions, you need to let people know they can speak openly and honestly without recrimination as well. Okay. So there we are. Look, that's just a high-level introduction to Agile. So then I guess we have to answer the question, what's the right way to do Agile? There is no right way to do Agile. The right way is the right way that works for your team at that particular time based on their maturity, experience, competency, the complexity of the projects, the demands of the client. All of that is the right way to do Agile. And that's why I like Disciplined Agile, because you get to choose different elements. You can even change per iteration sprint if the team wants it on different tools and techniques. Scrum is a wonderful methodology. It's one of my favorites, but you see it imposed on people and it doesn't quite work. So remember that. The foundations of Agile are a high-performing team deciding on the way that works best for them. And processes and tools are not as important as the people. So the first thing you need to do is get trained up in Agile, and then you can choose the right ones for you. So look, just recapping, and there is no words and definitions at the end of this one. Match the words and definitions like all the other modules. But look, just recapping, the heart of Agile is an empowered, self-organizing, high-performing team. There are many useful tools and techniques from different Agile approaches to help your software development, but it's not just about software, because predictive projects, construction projects can learn from all of these approaches and use the tools and techniques. So there we are. That's my introduction to Agile. I hope you got something out of it. As with each one of the other modules, if you do have any questions at all, just drop me an email and I'll do my best to get back to you as fast as I can. Thank you very much for watching this. And I look forward to hearing from you. And have a good day.